innovation is what drives like adoption, and for you to have innovation you need to have experimentation. And for us within the social context, Farcast is a perfect playground. I want to see 1,000 degens coming out of Farcast. And what's beautiful about this is like the network is going to evolve. It's either going to evolve or it's going to die and become something like better. You know what I mean? Like it will evolve to sort of adapt to innovation.
Episode 55 of Invest in Music with Carlos from Farcaster Index. Today we talk about building a client on top of Farcaster, his journey building the Forefront DAO, meme coins, social tokens, everything you could possibly know about Farcaster. As a reminder, you can collect this episode on investinmusic.xyz. We covered about 3 to 4 years of us working together, and it was one of my favorite episodes we've done. So without further ado, let's get into it. Episode 55 of Invest in Music with Carlos from Farcaster Index. We are back. We got Carlos from the Farcaster Index with us today. Carlos, what's going on, man?
All good, bro. Good to see you.
This is a very full circle episode. I feel like you and I have been working on projects together for the better half of almost 3 years at this point. So it's definitely a very long overdue episode.
Yeah, it is, man. It's been a minute for sure.
I want to get into all of that, but before we do, why don't you give us a quick background on yourself, and then we can unpack all the stuff that you've been working on lately and some of the projects that we were working on before.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, long. I'm trying to think like the best way to put it. So my name is Carlos. I'm from an island called Cape Verde. It's a tiny, small island down West Africa. Um, yeah, so spent half of my life in China. Did all my studies there. Ended up sort of like get pulled into crypto when I was in San Francisco um, in 2014. Since then, we just been building in the space, right? So yeah, that's pretty much like short,
It's a
very
very
short
unabridged
version.
background there. Yeah. I would
Yeah,
say we first met when you were working on social tokens. And so, the way that
yeah,
we obviously spent a lot of time together was through Forefront, which I want to dive into. But if my memory serves me correctly, there was actually a time when you had your own personal token that you were
yeah.
working on, and that sort of evolved into Forefront. So would you mind
Forefront.
kind of giving the quick background on like the early social token days and kind of your involvement back then?
Yeah, right. So at that time, I was working at the Hobby Exchange in China, and besides my sort of like was doing master's degree at the same time as well. Um, my way to get a sort of like disconnect with a little bit of all the work I was doing, just to experiments, fun experiments on the internet. So I came across this concept of social token via a platform called Roll, and I was like, what if I could use, mint a token to incentivize people to use sort of like my products or experiments that we're doing, right? Social experimentation. Um, so I minted a token called Swag. Via Roll, and I start
Two
sort of like
G's.
dropping all, yeah, 2 Gs. And by the way, the story behind 2 Gs was it was a misspelling when I shipped the token. It
Classic.
was
I've been there,
supposed to be
bro. I've been
it
there.
was supposed to be, yeah, so it was wild, right? So Lounge Swag, I did a lot of experimentation there. And I met other people that was actually were actually exploring social tokens as well. So like Alex from Dracula, very well. Brian Flynn from Rabbit Hole as well, Jazz. Then we were like, what if we just sort of like try to figure this thing out together, right? As I was experimenting with Swag, this idea of a marketplace for social tokens came out. So I was thinking like, what if we had a place where we could document what was happening in the space? So we started like having guest writers. I think you were like the second guest writer on Forefront, which
Mm-hmm.
was like wild. um, and it sort of like went from there. And since then, I think Forefront sort of evolved into this idea of social tokens, then DAOs, and then luxury media tokenized community along the way. And I think like the version of social tokens that we have today, scene coins, we're calling them today, meme coins, it's a version of we've seen cultural coins sort of emerging that we envisioned that would be like a 2021 thing. If you remember,
Mm-hmm.
we're very bullish, still very bullish, but it took a little bit longer. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's like a really quick short story there.
Well, it's a very relevant topic for today's conversation because anyone that's listening to this knows that I've been spending all of my time on Farcaster, and we've been seeing these tokens go crazy the last couple of weeks. Things like DEGEN and higher, and we can go into a bunch more. But I think for me, I wanted to really just unpack like the evolution of these social tokens and kind of where you see them going. And then also, I know that you're working on some really amazing product stuff as well, so I want to get into it. But before we do that, I also want
Yeah,
to give you your kudos for being an amazing designer. You helped me design
yeah.
the DAO landscape. Most recently, the Farco system. We've been doing these kind of graphics and landscape maps together for a very long time. So I would love to kind of hear about your background in design as well.
Yeah, right. So prior to sort of like do bachelor in computer science, I used to love design a lot. Um, I sort of like shifted along the way when I was studying, but I was used to be like a multi sort of type of guy. Like I just wanted to try everything I could
Mm.
get my hands on. Design actually came very naturally when I was competing online for contests. So it sort of evolved from there. Me understanding like user experiences, UI, and not being afraid to try new things as well. And whatever I wanted to build a product, like code a product, I would have to design it myself. I want to get it done, do vision the way I envision it. So I figure out I'll just learn. So I think like me and you, like I think the first major collab that we did was Social Tokens Report 2021 that
Yep.
I sort of like with Seed Club. Um, and we sort of like whenever you have something and whatever I'm thinking something, we just like, can we do it? And my approach has been always like, why not? Like let's just do it, right? So that was design. And today, like with everything that I'm doing, I actually do everything myself just to make sure like it's not the best design in the world, but it gets going, right? Like I'm getting the first idea out, the MVP out, and then once we're sort of like reach that escape velocity, then let's get something more fancier. But yeah, I love to design, and I wish I was doing that more, to be honest. But yeah, just too many things.
Well, I wish that you gave yourself a little bit more credit because you're a phenomenal designer. And I think I've always been impressed by your ability to not only make graphics, but also just to stand up like full fledged sites. That social token report that you're talking about, we built a whole website for it. Like not only was the
Yeah,
content really compelling talking about FWB and Whale and RAC and all these tokens that were happening at the time, but it was stood up as like its own site. And I feel like for me, watching you now get to building the Farcaster Index, it's felt like a really natural progression where you've always kind of been at the forefront, no pun intended, of this kind of social token, scene coin, meme coin space. And I feel like you really found a great way to capitalize on that with the whole Farcaster Index because I posted about this the other day, but I check it every day now. To me, it's kind of a great way to stay up with what's going on with Farcaster. I think it's highly representative of the best tokens in that
yeah.
ecosystem. And I guess I'd love to hear, how did you arrive on the decision to want to build that Farcaster Index?
Yeah, right. I think been building product for Forefront for a very long time, and distribution was always a problem. Forefront had two major issues. One is identity and distribution. We wanted to sort of like build on top of the media, like scene that we had at the time, but we also wanted to build products to represent the future that we see the space going. So, but it always sort of like it was a friction between these two. So when we decided to sort of like sunset Forefront, like probably like last year, I decided to sort of focus on Farcaster ecosystem, like go 100%. Cooper, like I think the funny thing was like I wanted to be a mini Cooper. That was exactly my thought. I was like, I want to be like a mini influencer, like a mini Cooper. Someone is like the way you do. I really love your approach when you're really into exploring a platform. You go all in, and you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
sharing perspective. You're connecting, and my goal as a builder was always like, can I be more like out there? Can I try to do things a bit
Mm.
different this time? So when I decided to focus on Farcaster, my goal was one to be like an active builder. I wanted to sort of like build with the
Hmm.
community and don't build with like a vacuum. I didn't want to just build the features that I wanted to see. I wanted to sort of like, how can I leverage this network of like amazing people and builders and learn as much as I can and then build a useful product. Um,
Hmm.
Farcaster Index was like an overnight idea. I jammed with Jihad. I was like, we know what we cool. Like I can see channels becoming like tokenized. I can see like tokens becoming like something very important in the forecast ecosystem. What if we had a marketplace that you could sort of like integrate those things? And it was very familiar because we built an entire like ecosystem of that with social tokens, with terminal before for tokenized communities. But also we worked. One thing that we were really close to launch was social tokens index with Index Scoop back in the days. So
Wow.
like yeah, just mixing all that those things together made sense. Like what if we sort of like futuristically predict that they would need a basket of index that is capturing the upside of Farcaster. What if we just launch a site now that represents that is going towards like what if in the future we sort of like have a marketplace of discoverability that is like trusted, trustful, and is curated in a way that makes sense. And yeah, it was just I was really well positioned to do that because we've done that many times. And from there, it just from a weekend project, it just sort of evolved. I'm trying to improve every single day in terms of like how can I build with everyone that is using the product. We've seen a lot of like a spike in usage, obviously. We're yeah, just trying to sort of figure out what's next there. But like it has been an amazing journey, and yeah, we have a lot of features in the works. And I'm excited to see like how the product evolves as the Farcaster ecosystem evolves and represents it best represents Farcaster as a community, and this idea of like exploration between lore, community, and tokens are very powerful that we haven't seen in social. Obviously, we haven't seen anything really like click at the moment. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to help contextualize this for people that are listening and maybe hearing about it for the first time. So if I go to Farcaster Index, which by the way is farcaster.in, we'll see here there's about, I'm going to say roughly 30 tokens. I just see it's 27 exactly is the number here. And just to
Yeah.
give some context, the reason why I find this to be really interesting is because if you go to Dex Screener and Base, I'm looking at this right now, I pulled it up. Top
Hmm.
tokens of today: Cheeky Dog, Based Pang, Blurf, Poon, Base Shiba Inu, Pepe But Blue, Base Boy, FOMO Base, GameStop, Brett, Toby, Do Not For Meow. Like, I just want to highlight to people that the reason why Farcaster Index is so powerful to me is that it helps better contextualize what I believe to be the value and the culture of tokens on base that I think are going to be extremely valuable in the future. And to your point, you mentioned, this combination of community and culture and tokens. That's not to say that those meme coins I just mentioned aren't trying to build communities, but I think that they are building them in fundamentally different ways when we think about the communities that are being built on Farcaster. And so I guess I'd love to hear from you. There's 27 tokens on there. What does it
Hmm.
mean for a token to be kind of Farcaster native?
Right. I think like first of all, like this is an evolving process. I want to make sure like there's not a right or wrong ways to do it. But the intentions are absolutely like directionally correct, like right. So we want to make sure like we have a platform that people can sort of like at the most have a high sort of like high like expectation of like trust, let's say like this, right? So you go there, you find tokens are listed there, you can dive deep into the data, but like those tokens make sense to be there because they sort of like merge this idea of like cultural and Farcaster. So we have a
Mm-hmm.
saying that so just we sort of like define this idea of like Farcaster native, and I get a lot of the answer, what does it really mean Farcaster native? And if you are on Farcaster, if you use Farcaster, if you're new to Farcaster, when you first sort of like start interacting, you feel the difference between being on Farcast and being on Twitter. People are more intentional there, and
Mm.
people are more like sort of like this is a idea of like a community that is a bond, a community bond that you can see on other platforms like Lens, but it's very like specific to Farcaster. So like this idea of Farcaster native comes so like can no is the community building with Farcaster ecosystem? Is the majority of the community on Farcaster, right? Because Farcaster has this really powerful thing with like social graph that you can not only build on top of it, but you can make sense of a lot of like activity. So one thing that we saw, one trend that we actually saw with Farcast Index in the beginning was like there was a strong correlation between the active participants of a specific community and their influence within the Farcaster ecosystem, and like the movements, like the volume of the token and the price of the token. right? Like, so we've seen that
Mm-hmm.
playing like in real life with Hire, for example, right? That's one of like it
Mm-hmm.
has the highest like holders percentage, the Farcaster, and just all holders, which is a very interesting metric. So one, like Farcaster native. The second thing is like we didn't want token to be like pure speculation. We wanted to be sort of like what I call like speculative utility. Sort of I had like a part utility, a part speculation that sort of makes like a nice mixed hybrid token, right? And with
Mm-hmm.
Farcaster, you have incentive, whereas like how can we grow this network, this community into something more special, but also like we're doing this in a very like DEGEN, but a positive sum DEGEN way. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we sort of define, and I was telling this early, is like it's not very new because like when in 2021 when we're envisioning like what a social token would look like, we identified like and you were one of those curators that defined together we define like what does it mean in terms of the metrics and like valuation process. So it made sense that like some of those things like were like, oh, this is very similar to what we did before. We know that it works because back then no there was there was a framework we put in place. So yeah, so essentially like the number one focus is like forecast ecosystem, like what communities are sort of like coming out of it, what sort of utility and experimentation has been done there as well. How can we sort of like build a call, not only define what's coming out of our cast ecosystem, but also like sort of like envision and guide communities in ways that can build around the Farcast ecosystem, like following the best practice of the best communities. So like essentially what you want to see like in the future forecaster index is like a more like forecaster native metrics that makes sense of of the social graph, but also you want to see like frameworks and like documented like a blueprint of like ideal like path of a token that is built on forecast ecosystem. And I think that's where things
Mm-hmm.
going to
Mm-hmm.
become very interesting. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think something to call out there is 2021, we were tracking all these social tokens. You mentioned that you didn't want to build in a vacuum. And if you think about social tokens in 2021, there wasn't like really a good venue for all of these different tokens to exist. You know, you had people doing Discord, you had people doing Telegram. You know, Discord never was really like crypto native. Like you had Collabland and all these bots and stuff, but like even running FWB back then, like it was weird to have a token tied to a social product. And I think for me,
Yeah.
the biggest unlock here was as Farcaster started to get more popular, the channel became the home base for the token. And due to the fact that everyone has a wallet already on Farcaster, you know, now we have actions and whatnot. I literally have actions installed that I can check someone's DGen balance or their higher balance in real time, like on every cast that they do. And I think to me that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg. But I'd love to hear if you've been putting more thought into, you know, this concept of a Farcaster channel and why it feels like it's more powerful than kind of the home base that we've seen for social tokens in the past.
Right. I think that's a really good question. I think the idea of forecaster being an ecosystem and channels and casts being part of that ecosystem, it sort of like it it brings everything under one roof, right? So you have a channel where
Yeah.
like community specific activities happening within a channel, but then if you go home feed, you have like what's happening within the entire ecosystem. So it makes a lot of sense. With difference with Discord, you had different Discord groups. It was very specific. You didn't have a whole view context of what was happening within the DAO ecosystem or social token ecosystem for that matter. So there's one thing. The other thing is like this. I don't think people realize how powerful social graph within Farcaster is, and it's going to make a lot more sense as we gather more data, as we're building reputation on top of it. Like there is a lot of application can come out, like things like, so we're now in the sort of like this read only gameplay where like if you go to Farcaster Index, for example, you can see like who are the top holders from specific communities, and essentially you could see like what their rank in terms of the entire network is, how trustful those portions are in terms of like contribution to the network. So you can make a lot of sense on that end. Yeah, I think like having the opportunity to sort of like now have a platform that is like very much this idea of decentralization is fun and everything else, but like if you're a normal person that is just stumble on Farcast, so you find a community like sounds familiar, right? It's like the internet playground where like people are building, people are like creating memes, people are doing like amazing things. But then once you sort of like relate that to the wallet and you relate it to something that is like not, the data is not owned by anyone, and you're building social graph, it becomes very natural. And then you start seeing like
Mm.
channels coming out, you start seeing like clients specific, content specific clients coming out, you start seeing like innovation like casts, like actions and frames and everything else. So man, like if it, like I wish we had this in 2021, but it wouldn't be possible because also the technological like blockers that we had. Like we couldn't do a tip. If you remember,
Yeah.
we couldn't do it because everything was an L1. You'd pay like $5 to
Hmm.
do like a dollar tip, right? You couldn't do it. I think everything is really coming together, and it is just the start. Like innovations are happening I think the next year, next 12 months or so. Yeah, we're going to be in a really sweet spot to sort of take this thing to the next level for sure. And Farcaster is like in the center of this. Farcaster Lens as well. Shout out to Lens, in decentralized social networks. So far, how do you like to call it, right? So,
Yeah.
but I'm excited.
Bro, I
Yeah,
mean, I was just testing that word out. The funny side story here is that I was just like, okay, everyone's saying social finance, social finance, social finance. And I was like, I didn't feel like we need to like decentralize finance all the time. We just called it DeFi. So I was like, let's see if people like SoFi as a name. And I just started this channel. I didn't even think about it. I just did it in like 5 minutes. And then like all of a sudden it had, it has like 9,000 followers or something now. And I don't,
yeah,
it's kind of this weird thing where like to your earlier point, I definitely made a conscious decision to go all in on Farcaster. I started to see the quality of the people that were posting there. The energy just felt good. I felt like I was getting alpha again for the first time on chain in a long time, and there's just a lot of positive signals. And I think to kind of like unpack what you just said a minute ago there, this tipping thing was like a major game changer for me. Like watching DGen kind of start early. I'll be the first to say when DGen started, like I didn't like dive fully into it for like the first
yeah,
couple weeks. Like I was like, okay, there's been points, there's been wow, 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 there's been these tokens on Farcaster. They're all just pump and dumps. Like none of this stuff's gonna stick around. And DGen, I remember when that first season was going on and people were getting, points basically for being active in the channel. I didn't think it would actually turn into something that was that massive. And I remember, buying the token around like 1 mil market cap. And I'm like, sure, like this is fun, but like what's going to
yeah,
happen here? It didn't feel that important. And then when it started to fucking moon and you had this daily allowance, I was saying to someone today, my peak daily allowance on Farcaster was 1.4 mil DGen, and it was on Valentine's Day. So I had 400K daily allowance from like,
it's
me being a big
crazy.
account. And then I got the million DGen tip for putting the top hat in my profile. And I
Yeah,
basically had like, 60 grand worth of tokens to give away to people. And I want to just stick on this point for a second because I can't tell you the amount of times this last week or this last 2 weeks that teams have come to me and said, we're building our token like DGen or using this model. And it's really
yeah,
interesting to me because tipping's not new. We were tipping people, like you said, 2021, we were tipping Swag, we were tipping FF, tipping FWB, all this stuff was happening. But to your credit about the power of a, on-chain social network, there was not like a foundation for tipping to really kind of catch and like stick and actually have this substantive value built on the back of it. So I don't know if you have any comments about kind of the whole tipping wave that's been happening on
yeah,
Farcaster, but I think it is extremely powerful.
yeah. Cooper is like coming from a small place that is not, America or Europe. I don't think we realize how powerful this is. Like
Mm.
we used to have if you remember, we used to have bounties in DAO, and with the forefront we
Hmm.
pioneer a lot of like this idea of bounties. We had like open board, open Google Sheet. Anyone can just go there and see the list of bounties that were happening. That were things like tweet this thing or like build something, like do something, do the work and you'll get rewarded, right? This idea. um People would like come and contribute and earn and then essentially make a living, wherever they were, like from these activities. Now we have a system, a social network, a Twitter. You're basically using it like you use Facebook or Twitter, like you do every day.
Mm.
But instead it's a positive somebody. You're actually getting reward, not only just building like your graph, but also you're getting real money. I think that we just call it degen, but like those are like one degen, 1 point is one degen, right? You're tipping someone
Yeah.
9,000, like 10,000 each hand. That's like $400. That's like
Yeah.
minimum income, like three, four times in a lot of countries, like most of the world, to be honest, right? So
Yep.
I was very skeptical. I tweeted this. I casted this a long time ago on DGen because we've had experience. Like the thesis was always there. Like Farcaster needed like I have this theory where I know Dan they're working on how can infrastructurally like they sort of structure Farcaster to sort of like 100x in terms of the growth, right? And my theory was like we'll get to 90x or 80x. The remaining 20x will have to come for communities that are actually building. And for us to do this, we
Mm.
need to experiment as much as we can, right? So like we had points, it was fun. Points had a really strong narrative, but it didn't have a community sort of like potential. Like DGen started with a community potential. Like it started with this idea like can we tip like and there was incentive like if the more you tip the more you essentially receive when with the airdrop, right? So it started with that. It was very, very like controversial in the beginning. I think people are calling DGen like the most amazing thing today, but I think they realized like they sort of forgot like 5 months ago, everybody like 90% of Farcaster OGs hated DGen, right? I think they want
Yep.
people wanted to sort of like leave Farcaster because of DGen,
It's so
but
facts.
it's so
People are
crazy
like,
and
shut up talking about DGen. Like I remember that so vividly. Everyone was like muting people
it,
because they were talking too much about it.
yeah, and um now it's a good story, right? Now it's an amazing story, but like
Yeah,
we
yeah.
wouldn't have this amazing story if it wasn't for the experimentation and even to have the sort of like balls to do it, So I'm really pro experimentation. Like I want people to sort of like, what if, what if like you could like there was this jam yesterday about this magic wand in crypto, like regulation, UX, adoption, everything like that, and I think like um innovation is what drives like adoption, and for you to have innovation you need to have experimentation, and for us within the social context, Farcast is a perfect playground. I want to see 1,000 degens coming out of Farcast. And what's beautiful about this is like the network is going to evolve. It's either going to evolve or it's going to die and become something like better, you know what I mean? Like it will evolve to
Mm.
sort of adapt to innovation, and that's what happened with degen. Now degen is sort of onboarding communities. It's like Dracula, the way Dracula sort of like pushed Degen and Degen pushed Dracula, right? And how they empowering communities to sort of build on top of it. It's amazing to see, right? And we're just touching. That's like just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there is, yeah, you can imagine like a lot of DJs is like art platform specific. I think like one learning, just stop there. One learning that I personally got from DGen is this idea of like a network native permissionless token, right? Like Farcaster has DGen. It has nothing to do with the team.
Yeah.
The team doesn't even, they do their own thing. Like DGen is his own base. Now it's an L3, became its own ecosystem, but it's very much like within Farcast ecosystem, right?
Mm.
Zora right now has Enjoy. Like Enjoy is touching the tip. What a currency is like permissionless has nothing to do with Zora team can become in the future. Bonsai, it's from Lens. So and it
Hmm.
started. Bonsai probably was a bit earlier than Degen, but like Degen showed us a blueprint of what this could become, and I really love that
Yep.
experiment, and I want to see more of it.
Do you like the DGen L3 and what's been happening on there so far?
Not really in terms of like well, let me rephrase that. I think it's
I
early.
feel the
I
same
think
way for what it's worth.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's early. I think it's early. I do think probably it was a bit premature.
Yep.
Just putting it out there. Like nobody knows, to be honest. I think there's a right or wrong way to do it. But I love the experiment. I think like um L3s are here, like they're not going anywhere. There are use cases for L3 that are very powerful. We won't find out until we actually get there. And like what
Yep.
other case would you see like someone like a Farcaster user like normie, the way they call like bridging to like to L from L1 to L2 to L3, right? It needs to have this social
Literally.
component, right? So you're receiving a tip on L2, and then you're like, oh, by the way, you can use this to bridge to L3 to do something else on L3. But like the entrance is like, this social playground that now evolving to its own ecosystem. So I'm really pro experiment in that way, that how we can sort of like not identify a way to onboard people to new ideas and platform and ecosystem. So I think yeah, DJN has been, I think, the work that Josek, his name, right?
Josek. Yeah.
Josek, yeah. I love the experimentation there, and I love
Mm.
builders doing that. So we need more of it. Yeah, well, we'll
Plus
see. We'll
one.
see. Like, I don't know if you're active on L3, on DJN chain or any other L3, but I'm slowly getting
Well, that's
there.
what I was
Just
gonna say.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like for me, first of all, launching an L3, great move to pump a token. That's what I'm going to say is like, you
yeah,
launch a chain, the token went up like 500%. If you're a token holder, the number one thing that matters is that the price goes up. I mean, take aside everything we said, I think the biggest turning point for DGen was when the market cap went up and people realized that they had like substantial amounts of money at play. Everyone
yep,
started to take it a lot more seriously. And I think
yep,
I agree with you that the timing was a bit premature to launch it, but it also wasn't in the sense that it made the token fucking moon, which kickstarted all these other experiments because there's all these other teams that are now like, oh, if DGen did it, we can do it too. Now, if we go
yeah,
into the specifics about DGen L3, do I love that the only thing you can really do is just buy more shit coins that are worse than the ones that are on base that are just like
yeah,
purple instead of blue? Like, no, I think it's actually like not very good. But do I think that it unlocked a big design space? Yes. I think my biggest hope is that we can focus less on trading shitcoins on the L3 and more on what got it there, which was this whole practice around tipping, around social
yeah,
currency, around daily allowance. Right now, I was casting about this today. I don't know when my daily allowance resets. I don't know how much daily allowance I have in real time. Like there's 4 different bots that are tracking it. It's all happening off chain. I have basically 5 grand to give people in DGen every day. And I want to go into like why and how I've been using that, but it's not on chain. And I think that an L3 is like the best use case for an L3 is like me sending you a dollar worth of tokens in real time and that transaction not costing anything, it being free, it being instant, and there being a ledger account for it. So I'll kind of pause there, but I do hope that the DGen ecosystem can go back more towards this tipping and this social component that got it there and less away from trading shit coins, you know?
yeah. I think it was expected. I think like what gonna get people to the door are shit coins. I think
Yep.
speculate. It's like how can like I think of speculation in the same way that I think about like totalitarian governments. Like, how can you
Mm.
control like a central part of something and delegate and incentivize a specific area you want to see development? So like for you to get people through the door to L3 right now, it's either like yes, like microtransactions, like tip, right? The other thing is
Hmm.
speculation, like people want to trade shit coins, right? Get them to the door and then you start seeing innovation. I think as a team for DGen specifically, they can focus on the core infrastructure. How can you sort of like now sort of like directionalize that focus to something more productive, which is like microtransaction and
Right.
tipping, and incentivize teams to build on top of it. That's the beauty of it, right? Yeah, I think we're on the same page here in terms of like what this could become, and experimentation there. But like I know I'm so happy that finally builders are making some money. You know what I mean? It's like I've seen
Mm.
everyone in the space like making tons of money on shit coins. I'm happy to see my friends win too, right? And I think you're right. Like the last 3 weeks, like I've been tracking like the performance of tokens, the Farcaster tokens on Farcaster Index, and it's absolutely crazy, right? Like the volume,
Yep.
even on Zora, it's a very new network. Like the volume is insane there. Base went from like 6 months ago, like now it's a totally different beast, right? And I'm happy to see like builders actually winning on Farcaster, like on Farcaster ecosystem. They were like bullish on DGen, they're building on DGen, and they're sort of like create this whole value. But then again, we have a
Yeah.
correction moment right now. We know what happens with shitcoin when things go up very fast. When things are, we're trying to pump things as much as we can. The expectation for DGen rose really quick as well. They had to put something out there. L3 came, and then now we get now the real work starts, right? It was not like two
Yeah.
weeks ago. Everything's is high on this momentum. Now it's like, okay, now let's slow down and get the most of this of whatever is happening here, and that's where innovation
Yeah.
and execution really outstands. But yeah.
I want to touch on one more topic on tipping, and then I want to move on to clients and kind of what you're working on now. But it's been
Hmm.
really amazing for me to be able to use my allowance to incentivize people to collect music because you probably have felt this yourself. Running
Yeah.
Forefront as an on-chain media organization, getting
Yeah.
people to mint media on-chain, whether it be a song or a blog post or a podcast or whatever it might be, is extremely difficult. The reality is
Yeah.
people just want to buy things that they think are going to go up 10 to 100x, and media assets have historically not done that. And so I just want to kind of pull that out for a second because I've been posting a song every day from Coop Records. I use my daily allowance to give people a tip if they collect the music, and that cycle has been really contagious. We're like on the back end, an artist that is dropping with us on Coop Records, they don't know what DEGEN is, they don't know what Farcaster is, they don't know what L3s are. They just look in their wallet on Sound and they see that they made $500 and it's like
Yeah.
100,000 streams worth of earnings. And that comes from these more crypto native experiments. And the reason why I wanted to unpack that is that very recently I had this realization that we don't need to like go and shout from the rooftops to get normal people into the space. Like just sell to the people that are here. Like when I'm on Farcaster, I'm not trying to like say to every music fan in the world, like, oh, you should come collect this on-chain music thing because you can get tip degen and all this great stuff. I'm just like, yo, I'm just selling to the people who are currently here and have wallets. And it's become so much easier for me to get people into things like Farcaster now because I'm like, yo, download this app and I'm going to give you free money. Like, just reply to my shit. And they're like, what do you mean you're going to give me free money? I'm like, literally, just reply to my cast. And I'm going to drop you $50, $100 in daily allowance every day because it's just part of the culture. And I think
Yeah.
there's something so powerful that with how it relates to getting this flywheel going around actually tipping and supporting on-chain media in a way that I don't think we saw before with this whole meta around, open editions, limited editions, whatever you want to call it, that we've been doing for the
Yeah.
last like 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great because like Jihad has been really the advocate on luxury media. Like he really believes we are seeing like this taking shape in real time now. Like
Mm,
it's crazy. Like a lot of things that we thought about like way before that would potentially happen. It's sort of like slowly unfolding in a different way that we thought it would be, and I think that's the power of like innovation as well. Just to touch on that, but we always for Forefront we used like what I love about the story about Forefront is like the the builder culture within the circle that we had in the beginning. It's like I remember I used to tell you like, do you want to write about this thing? And you were like, sure. The next morning you're like, boom. Like the
mm,
same for Brian and everything. So we really wanted to sort of like let's produce things that are like great that people can document, that people can read and stuff like that. And for Forefront, we always struggle with distribution, and we have a big following on. I mean, for a DAO, like 22K for a very long time for a follower on Twitter, it's like you expect some activities there, and we always struggle with like minting concept, right? Like why would you mint like a piece of like a blog, right? Or like like you say,
yeah,
like a song, music, NFT? Because people, the concept of minting, of flipping, of buying low and expecting the value, it's really hard. So like advocating for like why mint was very important. We've done that. Zor has built an entire infrastructure to support that with open edition, with what they call free mints, essentially. And I think tip is sort of expanding that concept in a more tangible way. It's like I was very
mm,
impressed when I was at ETH Denver, and you were telling me, no, during a panel, you were mentioning how you guys are onboarding normies to crypto when they go to your events, right? Like this idea of like that's a tipping system, right? Like you go there, you
yeah,
tap, you check in, and then you get like instantly like a couple dollars in your account, and then you're in, and then you're a potential customer that goes there. We're doing that with
yep,
DGen in a larger scale, obviously, and I'm thinking like how this could go. How can we port the tipping experience within Farcast ecosystem with the DGen into like more tangible ways, where like I can see Cooper Records doing that in like was it a G Money event in New York,
Yep.
the lounge, and if you were like the first 200 people, you'd get like DEGEN for check-in, and you just go there. So you just get airdrop
Mm-hmm.
some tokens. You're like, oh fuck, like now I'm in this thing. Why did it happen? And then you start asking questions. You start understanding how the culture is working. And I think one thing that people are not talking about much is how it's not only about tipping, but it's also how you sort of how tipping has become like a cultural thing too within the ecosystem. It's like if I was talking with someone the other day. It's like if I like something on Farcaster, I'm like, I should be tipping this because like I can relate to that content.
Mm.
This is a great piece of content that I've seen. I just, this is great. I want to reward you for, putting it out there, right? So this idea of like, what if you have a system where like automatically a like is a 10 degen, right, or is a 20 degen, right? So you talk with so many people. It's like if I comment on like drops a comment on a specific cast, you're like, yeah, it's rude if I don't leave a degen tip. So it has become this really powerful mechanism to only reward content, but also to build products in the community. Like yesterday I did, um, I'm rewarding like DGen to like feature requests of Farcaster Index. We got like in the first 30 minutes, and you provide a really great feedback, and 30 minutes later I shipped it, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
it's not only like I'm doing this to get rewarded, but also like, oh, I'm building a relationship with you now because like
Mm.
you're incentivized to actually help me, but also I really appreciate that you could also get that from somewhere else, but you're actually doing the work to sort of give a productive feedback. Yeah, like to your point, I think like this idea of exploring microtransactions and exploring tip within the context of social is extremely powerful. And then think about how you can pour that to like in real life experience. It's like they could sort of like they could merge. It is extremely powerful, and I'm happy to see like you doing that experiment, Jimani doing that experiment into like tangible things that people already are doing every single day, which is like brand and concert and events and what's not. But yeah, like I'm extremely bullish.
It's going to get way bigger. And I think right now DGen's kind of the core currency for tipping, but I anticipate that every token within the Farcaster index, and honestly just every Farcaster token in general, will likely
Yeah.
have some tipping mechanism to it. And I think the ways that people are tipping, the ways that you're getting rewarded for giving people tips, for getting tips, how to stake your tokens, increase your allowance and whatnot, the design space feels so amazing that for any like founder that's listening to this, like really dive in on that. Like I actually think
Yeah.
there's still so much meat on the bones in terms of expanding the design space around how to do tipping on chain and how to kind of make people excited about that. I want to go into what you're thinking about now. I think the natural progression of this
Hmm.
conversation is clients and kind of where we're going. Before
Yeah.
we go to that space, tell me about running a DAO for the last 2 years, because I want to go on record and say that I used to be all DAOs. I like wrote this post, full time DAOs. You designed the graphic for it. I fucking love DAOs. And then
Yeah.
I got so burned out by them, man, where I was like, this governance
Yeah.
shit sucks. People don't want to
Yep.
vote. You're whipping them for everything. Like, what was your experience running a DAO like the last 2 years?
Oh man, where can I start?
Yeah.
It's good to put this into perspective. So the way I started Forefront, it was a one man product. So it was me building Forefront. It evolved with like collaborators like you, like Jazz and everyone else. Um, the moment there was interest, we raised capital, and DAOs were like at DAOs are here. It was just me building Forefront.
Yeah. Yeah.
It built enough capital, like brand capital. We raised capital, and then we sort of like onboarded as much people as we could to the DAO, to the DAO, to Forefront DAO. Um, one, by the way, I don't think there was a regret here. I fucking loved the whole experience of building anything that I do in
100%.
the space, right? There's yeah, but like there were some mistakes that were made. We onboarded like way too fast. We focused too much on um, vibes. Let's say 2021 communities were just running on vibes. We used to say this all the time, right? But like it was very like the intentions were there. We imagine like a world where like
Mm-hmm.
bunch of collaborators come online and they form subgroups, and they create whatever makes sense for them, but the value is accruing back to the original group, like to the overall group, and it's like duplicating from there and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, it just went. The experiment just went a little bit too optimistic, to be honest. I think like there were models of DAOs that um, we should have been aware of, like in the early beginnings. We didn't. So it was very tricky. And I think for Forefront specifically, and for me as a founder, one thing that I learned is one positive thing that I learned is like when people come together on the internet to create anything is extremely powerful. We might not have the
Mm.
tools, we not have, there are like a lot of circumstances that determines like what success would look like, but it's very amazing to see people like total strangers who just come together. It's like let's do this together, right? So I think the evolution of DAOs is what we're seeing today via Farcaster channels and lens and meme coins and cultural coins and scene coins and everything else, which is very interesting. For Forefront, we always struggled. I think like as we brought capital, we struggled to generate revenue. We tried
Mm.
everything, and I think most DAOs, like if you don't have a business, it's like, yeah, tokens are product. I think like Jess is very like on that. I think back in the
Yeah,
days,
yeah.
tokens were not product. Maybe they are today, but like you need to have a model. You need to, you know. Back then, if I would go back and go in time, I would run the DAO in a way that is like a tiny startup that is fueling the innovation within the community. And for you to run a startup, you need basic things like find product market fit and generate revenue, at least have a path for that. Yeah, so there was that, and I think the best thing that happened for Forefront, we evolved, and I think the best thing that I remember, it's the fact that we onboarded a lot of contributors in the beginning that now are doing their own thing in their own way, in their own vision, right? And that I'm so proud of that, like very much. And the second thing is like the decision to sort of like shut down the DAO was probably the best thing that we did. It was a slow death, spiral death, like burning. Everybody was burned out. I was burned out. Like, so I became
Mm.
very skeptical on governance. Like, governance minimization is the way to go on an experiment we're doing. We have to build toolings that sort of like put the trust at the forefront, right? People like can see what's happening on its on chain world. Like you can track things. So we have to build tools that allows like right people to make right decisions. We have tools to make sure everybody's like things are transparent and things like that. But like I'm very bearish in the classic model of DAOs that we tried back then. And I want to see
Yep.
models of like C corps, sort of like fueling the innovation with the community, or like meme coins that have a central team that is like doing bad or like right or wrong decisions, but like is intentionally right to progress the community and fueling the community.
Yep.
And yeah, and I think we arrive in that model where like this is the DAO, and I think most like 90% of the shit coins are we're seeing today are running better than 99% of the DAOs back in 2021, which tells you a
100%.
lot about how things were. But then again, we didn't know, right? We didn't have the tooling, and we needed
Totally.
to do that in order for us to get here, right? So and
Mm-hmm.
for me specifically, I think that's one thing is like yeah, it has been a great, everything is a journey in life, to be honest, right? There isn't a moment you would like it, just yeah, so it's a learning experience. We need to experiment more, and for me it has been always like this. But yeah, like forefront, it's very tricky because when you have a baby, like this is your baby that you sort of like built for love, like you had no intention of like capitalizing or something, but it became something that you had to do because it became too big
Yeah.
too fast, and then you're like, oh, we're here now, then we need to sort of like be more intentional, and that what happened. But like yeah, I think like the version of DAOs that we see today, like what if you want to call them DAOs, the meme coins, sin coins, are like substantially better than what we had before because of the tooling innovations, but also because of the space that we are today, and the learnings that we had as well. So and I think like there are few people that understand DAOs like you, Cooper. Like you were in the very beginning of that. You advised like 99. We remember the thing that we did is like
Yeah.
that report that we. It's like all DAOs lead to Cooper, So you
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know like the bad and the worst and everything else. But I'm happy like yeah, things evolved in a very beautiful way, to be honest. Yeah, it's
Well, I
crazy.
just want to say that I think you making the decision to sunset Forefront was actually extremely bullish to me. And the reason
Yeah,
for that is that I think that too many founders in crypto get too married to this thing that was in the past and not what can be today. And when I think of
yeah,
things like Farcaster Index and then what you're building now, for example, you're taking all those learnings, but you're doing it with a new coat of paint. And I think it really gives you this freedom to apply those learnings without all the baggage that came before it. And one thing
yeah,
I just want to unpack that you said there is like, crypto is this really weird thing where things just fucking rip all of a sudden, everything changes overnight.
yep,
I have this graph like back here on my whiteboard. If you can see
yeah,
it, it's what I've been calling the most ideal token chart, which is like it starts out really quiet and then it kind of picks up over time. You know what I mean? There's kind of this inflection point that happens. But I think
yeah,
what we don't talk about enough is, Forefront had one of these inflection points. I remember when the token went up fucking 10x in a week.
yep,
FWB had this inflection point where it went up so much. And you see this now with DEGEN and with Higher. And you have these kind of moments where the thing gets so big so fast. And it really, the expectations are extremely intense because everyone has made all this money on the back of it. People are getting rich. They want you to ship faster and whatnot. And, I guess just for you specifically, I found it really amazing watching the way that you built Forefront out because even though tokens are extremely hard to manage, you never stopped, building out and shipping what Forefront originally promised to do, which was to build an on-chain media brand around all of the social elements of the space. You were
yeah,
shipping articles every day, you were shipping media outlets, you're shipping podcasts, all this stuff. And, to the point of where we are today, I don't think we had the right venue for those type of products to really take off. And I'm really glad that you were able to take the learnings that you had from running Forefront for multiple days, make a very definitive decision to be like, hey, we're sunsetting this. And now you can
yeah,
apply those to what you're working on now. So I don't know if you have
yeah,
any comments there, but I'd love to go into kind of what you're working on now as kind of the next topic.
yeah. Now I will just double down on that. I think like it's extremely hard to sort of like, oh man, it's been like 3 or 4 years. Like, hold on to that vision of
Yeah, yeah.
social tokens becoming a thing, and now we're seeing a version of that vision today, right? So, I think that's the most important thing. Is not don't like as a founder, like one thing that I'm constantly learning is like don't don't get married to the product, get married to the mission, right? Like
Mm.
ship as many versions of that mission, a product of that correct to the mission as you can. But like if you truly believe, hold on to that vision. You might shape, you might as a space and be like open for that. And I think that we're seeing this with me, and for me specifically, it's never too late to sort of like redefine yourself, so to speak, right? I used to build really closed doors. I'm trying to be more open now, and building the public and doing podcasts like we're doing now, and just be out there a little bit more. And it has been amazing, amazing so far.
Mm.
And yeah, so and the goal of Farcaster Index is really how can I build in a different way that I haven't tried it before. So like how can Farcaster, can Index could be powered by community and can be powered by grants and can find a revenue path and can sort of like yeah, just go from there. So it has been amazing, and yeah, and then all the experiments that I want to try. And I think it's a founder dilemma where it's like how can you keep your focus in one thing and then 100x that instead of just building a
Yep.
thousand things. And that's one thing that I've been doing for a very long time, which is like it's a learning process. And yeah, would love to chat on that as well. Like other things that I'm thinking that will make sense too. That I'm thinking, I'm more actively working to build. But it's tricky. It's very tricky. Yeah,
Yeah. To comment quickly on the topic that you just broached there, I want to go into what you're building now, but I will just say that it's something that I struggle with a lot too. Running Coop Records as a record label, I've always struggled with seeing my friends building these products for 5 years. They have such dedication to just one product and they keep upgrading it. They ship new features. And for me, I'm always kind of like a little bit following what's going on. Like the meta is changing all the time. this project just launched, this token just launched. And sometimes ask myself, am I just getting too distracted? And I'm obviously biased in saying this, but recently I had a realization that there is a superpower in being able to kind of see the full map and the full picture, right? Like you can either go super far down one rabbit hole, or you can kind of sit and have this bird's eye view, which is like I can kind of zoom in and focus on things, pull out from here, zoom in on this, pull out for things. And since we've known each other, it's been like social tokens, DAOs. I've obviously been on this huge music tirade recently. Now we got Farcaster, we got meme coins, and the things are always changing. So I guess to anyone that's listening to it, I think the biggest point that I've gotten from this episode is you just saying like keep experimenting and keep trying because you don't
Yeah.
have to be married to one specific thing. There's actually a lot of power and beauty in shipping a lot of things and constantly learning from that along the way. So
Yeah.
taking that into kind of some closing thoughts here, what are you working on now? Give us the alpha on what's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, right. So for the record, Farcaster Index is built by Moonlight. So Moonlight is an what I call an on-chain product studio. So you can find us on Farcaster. Very inactive account. There's like some alpha happening there. We're testing their like work in production there, and one thing that actually prior to Farcaster Index, one thing that we were very bullish is the first wave of like content clients on top of Farcaster. So we start working on a client that we think, yeah, there is some potential there, right? Um, we are sort of like shipping the beta at the moment, very closed, sort of like test environment with some of the people, and it should be go live like in a week or so. But essentially, we experiment with this idea of like, what if you could build like what if you could build core on top of a social graph that is constantly evolving, that is open and decentralized in a way that Farcaster is. So essentially, like one narrative that we're sort of exploring, me, Jihad, and Tony, which is the team for Moonlight, is this idea of how can we make sense, contextualize casts, discussion boards within a specific client, right? So, like, one thing that we have with Farcaster, with Warpcast in the beginning, which is very tricky to compete to any sort of client, is really feature wise. To get it right is extremely hard. Uh, and for us, it's an amazing playground to get to, right? Like, how can we ship something that we're very proud of and into it as well, but something that's very useful for specific use cases, but also something that keeps us on the pulse of like all the innovation is happening, so like actions, frames, everything like that we can integrate. That's one thing that yeah, just sharing this for the first time, that we want to experiment with Moonlight. So if you're interested in take it for a spin, let me know. It works very similar to the way that Bountycaster does. We're integrating some smart like hashtags that you can use to trigger specific actions. Yeah, we want to get that out and get experiment. And
Very
again,
cool.
it's just another experimentation that we're sort of like doing as well there, and just see like if it sticks or not. But the idea of a client, a specific client for a specific type of content, I'm even exploring a specific like a Farcaster client for a Farcaster Index as well. So that would give me
Mm-hmm.
a nice playground to see like what works, what doesn't work in terms of the tech. What can be sort of like customized that I could potentially in the future. I'm not sure. Experiment with an idea of like Farcaster Index that focus on community and tokenization and lore and speculation and things like that. It brings everything under one roof. So it's all an experiment, like in the end of the day, and I think we need more of
Yeah.
that. And I'm happy to see like for us Moonlight to sort of try that. Yeah, that's it. And Moonlight is like self-funded at the moment. We're doing a lot of experiment to sort of like support that. And yeah, we're looking forward to like, and I love this idea of like jazz from Base, the shares is like, if you build on a super chain, you're gonna get rewarded. I think that's our approach. Is like we're not so concerned
Yep.
about like revenue and things like that. We just want to build amazing product people can use that it's actually useful, right? And then we can go from there. But yeah, that's the alpha. And by the way, we're very open. So if you are a builder, if you are like someone, a creator that wants to explore in terms of like product building, if you want to use like Farcaster Index API, you can hit me up as well. So we want to collaborate as many people as possible with an ecosystem. And in the end of the day, like I think I've sort of envisioned for the next 5 years of my builder career, it's going to be around what social fi, right? And Farcaster at
Yep.
the moment is like where everything is happening. And I think we're gonna see a versions of ecosystem of Farcaster that makes a lot of sense for specific type of contents or interactions. If it's at L3 or L2, I'm not sure, but I'll just be around, just open minded to like what happened in the ecosystem. I think
L6.
that's important. But yeah, that's it, man.
Well, Carlos, it's been amazing, man. I'm really thankful we got the opportunity to do this. Like I said, it is really long overdue, and there's so many other stories that we could
Yeah,
talk about. But
for
I'm
sure.
really stoked about where you currently are in your journey. I'm really excited
Yeah.
about the Farcaster Index, really excited about Moonlight. So, closing thoughts for people that want to follow you and your journey, what's the best place for them to keep up with your work?
Yeah, I like to flex that. You can find me on Forecaster at Carlos. That's me, right?
I was
So,
thinking about that when I asked
yeah,
that question. I was like, this guy's gonna say at Carlos, and that's gonna be such a
yeah,
bar. The more
yeah.
that this
Like,
fucking keeps
yeah,
growing, you know.
I wasn't as early as you, but I got the handle. So find me on Forecaster. I'm very active there. DMs are open. Text me or anything. But also, I would like to give you props, Cooper. You're someone that is like, there are like few people that I've interacted with in crypto that it's like so positive sum. You do so much for the community, but also
Mm.
you're building your vision in real time and you're documenting that. And that's very powerful, like for people to see, to relate to, right? And yeah, shout out to you, like for the work you do as well. And for actually, taking a chance of having me in this podcast. This is amazing.
Hell yeah.
It's just great for us to jam and everything else. And I got to meet you for the first time, see you for the first time in Denver, and great vibes, and yeah, I love that. So yeah, at Carlos on Farcaster, let me know if you have any feedback on the products we're building. If you want to jam or anything specific, yeah, just I'm open. Like I'm open book. Just let me know what's up, and then we can go from there. But yeah, appreciate you,
It's
bro. Like
amazing.
this has been great. Yeah,
It's been amazing, man. Well, thank you for coming
awesome.
on. Excited to see what you do next, and we'll take it from there.
Peace,
All
man.
right,
I
guys. See
appreciate
ya.
it. All right, bye.